It's been a while since I've done this. It was the words that grabbed me. I have this childhood memory of hearing someone read 1 Corinthians 13 in the early King James language. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. What was it that made those words connect with me? I was a child. I had this memory. I heard the words. Was it the dynamic way it was read? Was it the poetry of it? I'm not sure. But I remember the words coming through. As I came back to that passage, I began to see how it moves issues of faith from the enclosed rooms of worship houses and out into the center of life where we live. It's practical. It's down to earth. It speaks of a love that isn't arrogant or greedy, love that reaches out to others, love that perseveres, love that doesn't seek to dominate or find fault, that cherishes truth and is filled with compassion. Those are rather prophetic words for the time that many of us find ourselves struggling with right now. 1 Corinthians 13 comes from a man named Saul who lived in the city of Tarsus, who later became known as the Apostle Paul. In most of his writings, Paul worked at documenting the religion about Jesus, attempting to define early Christian doctrine. But this chapter is different. Here he seems to connect with the core of the religion of Jesus. Revisiting and reflecting on this passage, I began to conceptualize it as a kind of equilateral spiritual triangle, with each of edge and each angle the same. You can't alter any of the three without affecting the other two. They fit together: faith, hope, and love. Now, having said that, I think it may be important for me to point to what I mean by the words. So it's faith, hope, and love. These three connected and fitting together and moving to the center of one's spiritual life. Paul begins with faith. Each Sunday here, at the beginning of this service, we welcome people of free faith. Free faith. Find myself drawn to those two words, which declare that faith is something far deeper than complex doctrines, dogma, or creeds defined by some council. Faith is something that emerges within us as we learn and grow. It certainly does include what we believe deeply and value highly, but it's something more. Some people will see faith as the words of a spiritual. Hold on, keep your hand on the plow, hold on. And certainly determination has its place. But I've been drawn to a different definition of faith implied in the New Testament Greek word pistis. One of its core meanings is to place in trust. But to place in trust, I have to let go. I have to let go. So how can faith manifest itself as the ability to let go? I remember Khalil Gibran's words from the prophet, "Your children are not your children." He says, "They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams." Our children teach us that we have to let go. As speaking of faith as letting go may seem strange, but and perhaps it's more a verb than a noun, or should be. Some theologians do talk about faithing. In other words, faith is about learning to embrace life as a gift, to seek out the many dimensions of meaning that come to us. It's an exploration that enables us to live and not just exist. It's about accepting life as it is rather than the way we wish it would be. Faith is about learning to live with gratitude even when the hard times swirl around us. That idea provides a kind of segue to some thoughts about hope. Now, when I use the word hope, I imagine that many people will hear optimism. Sometimes I think about when I was young, around 7 or 8, I think. I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and we had a spacious backyard. That place was a center for me. It had bases, baseball bases. My grandfather built me a tree house, and that was the center, and I was comfortable and safe. I'm going to date myself, because at that time, our family had a subscription to the Saturday Evening Post. You know, with all of the cover pictures from Norman Rockwell and the stories. You see, I had learned to read, and I was reading the story, and I loved them because all of the stories had a happy ending. I loved the happy endings. But life is not all happy endings. In Paul's words, when I was a child, I spoke, thought, and acted like a child. But when I became an adult, I had to move away from childish ways. So where do we find hope? It was in the mid-60s, Thomas Merton wrote a book entitled Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. I looked at the title and said, oh, that fits. So I bought it. And when I read it, there was one thought that jumped out at me. He wrote something about, something like, sometimes in life we get about enough light to take one step. And when we take that step, we get light for the next step. And when we take that step, in the 30 years of the kind of specialized ministry, my students and I shared the task of walking through valleys with folks that were facing those one step at a time moments. See, life is a risk experience for all of us. We often spoke with folks who didn't quite know how they were going to face what was happening. They were people who wouldn't claim to be intrepid or strong, but who faced painful moments with courage. I think that's a good definition for hope. The sense that in whatever painful moments we face, we will find the strength. It's, I can make it, even if it's one step at a time. And what is love? How does it fit into a spiritual life? We sense that love is at the heart of spiritual life, but how? What is this abiding love that shows up in so many of our songs? We may be tempted to think of love as a feeling, but what Paul describes in 1 Corinthians seems to be, to me, much more. I mean, love contains all kinds of feelings. The simplest level, love is a verb. It's something we do when we reach out beyond ourselves. One of my colleagues used to talk about the fact that we don't bless each other nearly enough. It's strange, he said, that we don't find ways to reach out to somebody and say, "You matter. You're somebody to me." We all need to matter. That's why the random and sometimes seemingly wasteful or reckless acts of kindness can be so incredibly redemptive. Love is a decision, a choice to live generously and to give of oneself, especially when someone needs that presence and care. At another level, I think love is a capacity. I'll go back to Richmond now for a bit. I was in junior high school, and I was the first chair French horn player of the Richmond All-City Junior High Orchestra. High moment. Some years later, when I was kind of reuniting with my biological father, I mentioned to him that I played French horn. So at Christmas, he went out and found a retired high school French horn, had it restored, and gave it to me. I picked it up, put the mouthpiece in it, and in the next 5 minutes, I learned that I used to play French horn. Yeah, I think love is sort of like that. What I mean is, the more we dare to practice it, to reach out to others with compassion and caring and respect, giving our time, our attention, our capacity to love grows. I mentioned Thomas Merton earlier. He had a compelling definition of love. He says, love is our true destiny. We do not find meaning of life by ourselves alone. We find it in another. Love seeks one thing only, the good of the one who is loved. If for any reason we begin to shut these doors, the capacity to love seems to recede or to shrink. Finally, and one more thought. There are so many ways in which love seems to become from beyond us, in the divine, and certainly in other people. I was once writing a column trying to talk about how parents might teach their children to give. And I was beset with a stage of writer's cramp, or something like that. I was kind of stuck. John Gertis, my friend who practiced psychology at Geisinger, stopped by my office, and we chatted about my writer's block. I have a thought, he said. Maybe if we teach our children to receive graciously and gratefully, when they grow up, they'll know how to give. Sometimes a sermon needs a kind of a so what conclusion. And here's my so what today. that this spiritual triangle of faith, hope, and love endures throughout our lives as the core dimensions in which we grow. At different times, we'll find ourselves working at one or the other of them. When an intense experience challenges some core belief or value, we may face a time that the edges of our faith must shift or change. When our lives come to trying and painful moments, the reaching out for hope may take us through difficult and narrow, one step at a time passages. And love, giving and receiving are really part of each other. It's part of the same reality. But to give to someone or to receive someone's gifts, those things are not always easy. Choosing to be generous can be a struggle. May involve risk. So abide. Faith, hope, and love. A spiritual triangle. Paul says that there are three things that abide. Three things that are so fundamental that they last. Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. So may it be. Please rise in body or spirit, and let's sing together the closing hymn, Make Channels for the